welcome back. Welcome back to yet another episode of your favorite podcast, the Restricted Area Podcast. It's not the best podcast out there, but it is your favorite, or at least that's what I'm hoping. But hey, last time we spoke, which to me feels like eons ago, but in all reality, it was just a couple of weeks ago, right? The Boston Celtics had a chance at history. We spoke directly after the Derek White putback shot that now is, blissfully just goes into some deep, dark basketball highlight abyss that it will not ever be spoken about ever again. But nonetheless, we've now had an entire NBA final since then. Yes, there was a mourning period for me because if Boston had won Game 7, absolutely, I would have been on here talking my shit like promptly, maybe only a couple hours after the fact. But we're handed one of the most devastating losses of recent memory. Tatum, you know the story. Look, you know the story, okay? I don't need to repeat history, and I don't need to inflict or open up that wound, okay? But after the mourning period, which was a couple of days to 3 to 4 days ish, just a lot of stuff kind of came up on the radar that wasn't really like planning for, and so it got difficult to record. And about like game 3, game 4 of the NBA Finals, I was like, this is a great time. I can get back into the podcast. Honestly, it was just partly I wasn't that inspired. But 2, obviously I listened to a lot of different podcasts. I just didn't think that there was much more that could be said that hadn't already been said a million times. I just didn't think this finals had a lot of nuance to it. It kind of, maybe for like 15 minutes after game 2 that Miami stole in Denver, you could talk yourself into, hey, Miami, they got a chance here. Yeah, not really. It never really felt particularly close at all, to me at least. The story here is Nikola Jokic, right? And we're going to get into all of that. I don't know what else on the agenda tonight. Of course, it is late night. You know how we do. I try to get these done during the day. It's honestly just impossible. I live so close to a construction hell zone. And then just, there's so much noise during the day. I think I got a bird's nest in my window or something like that. It doesn't matter. So I don't know what I'll have time for. You can expect me to be back on a regular schedule of sorts. Honestly, I am way more excited for this off season. One that I have been for other off seasons in recent memory, but also I was just ready to get that finals over with. Like, we have a really exciting draft. If you don't know by now, I live in San Antonio. San Antonio is going to have a shot to take Victor Wembanyama. Of course, do they do anything else? Do they try to move up for another pick in the lottery? Do they try to they have a ton of cap space. There's going to be some interesting free agents, not amazing free agents, but there's interesting guys out there. Fred VanVleet, Brooke Lopez, Chris Middleton. Do they overpay some of these guys? Austin Reeves, do they stretch the Lakers? Do they push the Lakers to the test and give him a max offer sheet? I'm interested about San Antonio. I'm interested to see what else happens at the top of the draft. I have a whole big Portland thing that I want to do. Tonight's probably not the night because we should at least give Denver their due, give them their respect. I do want to talk about Nikola Jokic. And of course, because I have my own podcast, I have to somehow make this about me. And trust me, I will. I will do just that. But yeah, that's honestly it. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive into the finals, and then we'll probably, I want to do some draft stuff. I want to do some like draft day trade, like hypothetical scenarios. It's rumor season, okay, that's what it is. It's rumor season, baby. So I want to get into all the gutsy, nasty trade drama. But honestly, that's probably for either a part 2 that would be released later this week, or we'll just do a whole day on it. But we'll see. Nikola Jokic is the first player in the history of the league. A lot of guys have played in the league, by the way. A lot of great players too. To lead the entire postseason in points, rebounds, and assists. That's a pretty big deal. When we talk about the most complete players in the NBA, we usually look at a guy like LeBron or maybe kind of like not really Steph, LeBron or KD, like these like 6'8", 6'9" forwards, guys who look like Paul George and Jason Tatum, right? Like not guys who look like Nikola Jokic, 7 foot, just monster, kind of like running down the court like an injured deer. We don't really look at those guys and say that, wow, that could be the most complete player in the NBA. But really, I think Nikola Jokic has a really compelling case at that. And I think, honestly, he is. You see the tough shot making that he possesses. You see the incredible passing ability. He's the best passer in today's game, without a doubt. The ability to score at any point on the floor, true definition of a 3-level scorer as a 7-footer, is just mind-boggling. He is the best player in the world, without a doubt. And I said this earlier in the season, and it's why I thought he should have won MVP. I, for several years now, have thought that Giannis has been the best player in the NBA. And all throughout the season, I kept thinking, Jokic looks just as good, if not better, on a lot of nights than Giannis does. And he's at least making me think that there's a discussion to be had for best player in the world. Joel Embiid never once made me think that, because I never even thought he was better than Jokic. So I certainly never thought he was better than Giannis, I have, Embiid he's probably like the 6th or 7th or maybe 8th best player in the NBA, honestly. I'll probably at some point sooner than later do now that the finals is wrapped up, do a whole big like top 25, but like go real in depth on it. Because I think I like lists. Who doesn't? They're extremely popular, of course. But this postseason, I think, definitely had some shifts. Some guys go up and some guys go down. I think a guy like Jamal Murray is such an interesting case, right? Because it's not really fair with Jamal Murray, some of the stuff, like 0 all-star selections. Like, history may not look back at Jamal Murray all that fondly. There's a chance that if he stays in the West, there's a chance he never gets more than, 1 or 2 all-star selections, right? But, right now, how many more guards would you pick above him to go on a deep playoff run with you around the league? Steph, Dame, Luka, if we're calling him a guard. I don't even know if you're ready to put a guy like Shai Gilgeous in there. I don't know if you're ready to put a guy like De'Aaron Fox in there, although Fox was excellent in the first round, even despite getting hurt. The point is, it's a really short list, right? It's a very short list of guys that you'd want to go into war with over Jamal Murray. He's a big shot guy. He's a big play guy. He lives for these moments. Everybody remembers Bubble Murray. Well, it's not necessarily Bubble Murray anymore. It's just who he is when he's healthy. He's missed each of the last 2 postseasons. He missed all of last season. He really is a special player. And that, it's like I said, history may not look back at his all-time accolades all that fondly. But he's an example of a guy who, in our current player rankings, has definitely vaulted himself, I think, for sure, into the top 25. It's not like he was way outside of it either. But it's like he had to kind of, at the end of the regular season, you would not have had him in your top 25, right? Like, it took him a while to get back up to speed. While he did look good, it still was like, well, he's just like He's a really great guard, but he plays alongside one of the best players in the world, and that probably gives him some kudos. But, you know, he does vault himself into elite top 25, maybe I don't, top 20 is like, it's real easy to say top 20, and then you start listing guys, and all of a sudden you're at like 15 guys, and you're like, oh God, I don't know where this player's going to fit in. Point being, he's excellent, and he launched himself up a lot. Guy that maybe went down a few pegs, Jaylen Brown, maybe. Um, Obviously, the struggles in the Miami series, most notably, but just kind of not really ever, through 3 rounds, not really ever having a game that he was the best player in. That really is unfortunate. Even when you play alongside a guy like Jason Tatum, you got to have one. You got to have a game where it's like, I'm going to be the guy tonight. And when would the best time for that have been? Ask all Celtics fans. They will all groan. Game 7 of Miami, when Tatum goes down on the first play of the game. And you're just like, okay, that usually is a killer. But the Celtics luckily have a second All-NBA guy. And it's like, well, actually, the thing about that is he was no good and actually pretty downright terrible and awful. Obviously, the Celtics offseason is like pretty damn intriguing. I honestly think it's going to be kind of boring. Quick kudos. We're not leaving. We're not done with Denver. Quick kudos to the Celtics and Brad Stevens for getting on top of this coaching thing by quickly remedying the bench a little bit. They just added Charles Lee to be lead assistant. Prior to that, they added Sam Cassell, a guy who's won multiple championships as a player, been a coach in this league for the last decade. Plus, really, they didn't mess around. They were serious. Stevens took the podium a few days after the season had ended for the Celtics and said, he doubled down. He said, we're keeping Jaylen Brown. We're keeping Joe Mazzulla, and we're going to make it right. And so far, he's really owned up to that, and that's what they're doing. Regardless, there are still some pretty interesting decisions to be had. And so ideally before the draft and before things get all sorts of bamboozle crazy, we'll do the Celtics offseason thing, because I know it's been said and regurgitated 1,000 times, but I do have some things that I want to say about it. But like I said, we're back on a normal release schedule here. We're going to have time for all of it, I promise. Jamal Murray is the exact opposite of what I just said of Jaylen Brown, where Jaylen Brown didn't have one game this playoffs where it felt like he was really the best guy on the floor. Jamal Murray, despite playing alongside Nikola Jokic, who, we just said is the best player in the world, he still had nights where it looked like he was the most important guy on the floor, and it didn't have to be with scoring. He averaged 10 assists throughout the entire NBA Finals. He had multiple 12-plus assist games. He had I think it was game 4 in Miami, it was 12 assists, no turnovers. He really is a fantastic player, and it's his health and his confidence more so that really was the deciding factor for Denver on this run. As much as it could have been, obviously Jokic is the leader of the pack, best player in the world, one of the most impressive runs ever. But if there's no Jamal Murray, this doesn't happen. They probably don't have enough firepower to even get past a team like Phoenix that had 2 stars who were really gunning pretty hard in Durant and Booker. They needed that second guy. We saw it last year. We saw it the year prior with Denver. Without Jamal Murray, without that second guy, it's really hard. It's really hard to win anyway. But without Murray, it was a fucking catastrophe at times. Because the non-Jokic minutes already are kind of tough, but they can be remedied when you have a guy as good as Jamal Murray, and you saw that. You saw that in games down the stretch of the season. I actually had a note. I was taking notes a little bit throughout the series. I believe it was game 2. yeah, Denver goes up double digits at start of second quarter with Jokic on the bench, and I even wrote a little hyphen, thanks Jamal. Um, they, it was a small sample size, but Jokic goes to the bench at the end of that first quarter, and it's a relatively close game. And Denver, because of the likes of Jamal Murray, there's also a terrific supporting cast here that's not going to go unnoticed here. Um, but having that guy, that second star, who can kind of keep things afloat, but not only keep it afloat, but then also push the tempo in their own kind of way. And Jamal is obviously a tremendous scorer, a guy who can score at all three levels, and hits some of the ballsiest 3-pointers that you'll ever see in an NBA playoff game. That's just what he does. He had moments in this series where it was absolutely just bonkers wild, especially remember the end of game 2. There was Duncan Robinson 3 at about 4 minutes left. Duncan Robinson is doing the mean mug, which is super corny for a guy like Duncan Robinson because he looks like me. And you feel like it's over because Miami goes up double digits, huge 3. They're at home, or not at home. Series was a blitz. But needless to say, up double digits. Momentum is swinging Miami's way. And it is a 3-point game with 55 seconds to go because of an 11-2 run by Denver, mostly manned by Jamal Murray. He hits back-to-back crazy triples. It cuts lead from 9 down to 3, and then just wasn't enough. But in that game, despite Miami winning, you just never felt like they really had total control of the series or even of that game, just because they were so good and they only beat Denver by they just barely outlasted Denver. That's really all they did in that game. They just outlasted Denver. And of course you only get 48 minutes, so I'm not trying to give Denver some sort of false credit here. Like, man, if they just had 4 more minutes, but really, I mean, Denver got sloppy for a little bit too long during that game 2, and that they ultimately just didn't have enough time on the back end of that game to make up for it. I was gonna run through some notes that I had game by game, but really, I mean, you know how it goes. I mean, game 2 was really the only game that kind of had a narrative that differed from the status quo of this series, and we just kind of ran through that. Game 2 summary: Bam Adebayo MVP, excellent on both ends. Miami shoots the piss out of the ball to start the game. They look like the Heat of the Eastern Conference Finals. Huge Denver run at the start of the second half. Miami cuts it to 6 at half. They showed amazing poise in this game, just like they had all postseason, and that's what made you believe. That's what made you buy in to a potential Miami comeback or a upset, if you will. Just the fact that they have guys who show incredible poise at all times, and they never get flustered. They never get, they pretty much never play with any pressure, and maybe that's the perks of being an 8 seed, is you have infinite amounts of house money to play off of, but also being an 8 seed, you just usually aren't very equipped with enough talent to win these things. And so, like I said, if you ever thought Miami was going to win it, it was going to be in game 2. It was going to be because of game 2. And it just wasn't enough. They kind of gave it their all there. After that, I would say Miami really started to look gassed, and honestly, who isn't gassed at the end of a deep playoff run? Pretty much everybody is, except for prime LeBron James. But maybe I guess Butler especially. I mean, and I may talk a big game on Twitter. Look, I'm not way too into the business of bashing guys, but I have been puzzled by the weird and like Jimmy Butler's narratives, right? We're gonna segue into the Heat here a little bit because they deserve to be talked about too, good and bad. But Jimmy Butler, he's such a unique like character in the league, right? Jimmy Butler is 33 years old. Jimmy Butler has been in the league for 12 seasons. This was his 12th season. He's been with 4 different teams. He's now been to the finals twice, lost both. And he's just, for all the narratives on Jimmy Butler, for all the notoriety that he garners, for all the media and the press that he garners, and for all the airtime that we take up, that he takes up, what has he got to show for it, right? Like, the thing that really grinded me the other day was the Hall of Fame comments. Oh yeah, if I make the Hall of Fame, I'm just not even going to show up to the ceremony. It's just, I just don't care about it. It's like, seriously? Like, for one, like, if your career ended today, I really don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Maybe he is. I think Basketball Reference has him at like a 70% shot. I just don't know. I mean, certainly not first ballot. Maybe he's one of those guys that trickles in on a year where there's a pretty weak class. I don't know. Maybe there's a heavy Miami influence in the voting one year and he makes it in. Maybe Dwayne Wade becomes a Hall of Fame voter. I don't know. If it was up to me, I just don't think he's done enough up until this point. It's, and then it's, like I said, this isn't going to be a bash Jimmy Butler thing, but this guy takes up a lot of airspace, and he is very much a guy who is always yapping. This guy is always waffling about something. And I heard it was Austin Rivers, who was comparing Nikola Jokic and Jimmy Butler, saying, yeah, these guys, they're pretty much cut from the same cloth. Like, they just, they just don't care about, all the accolades, and, they just kind of don't care about the press or anything like that. It's like, no, actually, you're dead wrong, because if you just paid attention to this postseason alone, you would totally say that about Jokic, who the best quote ever from a finals post game, like, this is right up there when as soon as he sits down, the first question is that's thrown to Jokic is, hey, like, yada yada yada, are you excited for the parade on Thursday? And he goes, huh? Like, parade on Thursday? He just turns to like his media correspondent or his agent or whoever was on his left, and he goes, no. And he just like with a shocked and almost like disappointed look, he turns and says, no. Like, when is parade? And they're like, Thursday. He's like, oh. Like, you can go home Friday. He's like, okay. Like, this guy's not here for the parades. He's not here for the trophies. He's not here for you to tell him that he's awesome. He knows he's awesome, but he also just doesn't give a shit. Jimmy Butler, on the other hand, will he's the ultimate, like, I'm going to pretend like I don't care, but deep down, I really care. Like, that's always the vibe I get from Jimmy Butler. Like, after the conference finals, he looks at Bam. Even Bam's like, he like tries to pass him the trophy, and everybody's heard it by now. He goes, nah, I'll hold the next one. I'll hold the next trophy. And even Bam like kind of like does a soft like shrug of his shoulders almost, and looks over like, okay, weirdo. Like, we're allowed to celebrate. Like, there's like sure, job's not finished, but also just take the time to celebrate. This was a grueling 7-game series against a really awesome team, like, and we won. Like, we're allowed to celebrate. He just seems too cool for school all the time, and that to me is not nearly the same thing as what Jokic is doing. I think for Jokic, it's true. He is really the personification of, like, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Like that's, he really is. He really is. Not to say that he doesn't. I think there's like this notion that Jokic doesn't care about basketball at all, or that he doesn't work hard. Like that's ridiculous. That's insane. Like, you don't become the best player in the world by, without working hard. And just look at him physically. Like just look at his physique. You don't think he had to work hard, like, to get into the shape he's in. I'm not saying he looks like a world-class bodybuilder, but, a couple of years ago, maybe even after the first MVP, he was still often referred to as chubby or fat. And, you can't truly be fat and be an NBA MVP, but, it was true. Like he was definitely not in the best shape he could have been in. And you look at him now, he looks a lot more lean. He moves a lot better on the court. He moves a lot quicker. Um, you know, for his size, is fairly quick and a lot more nimble than what he used to be. So this is a guy who does give a shit and does work hard. So, um, don't confuse the nonchalantness and the interest in his other hobbies and his family and, being back home and, Sombor, don't confuse all that with the fact that the guy doesn't give a shit, because clearly he does. And he's going to be, absolutely incredible next year. And I'm actually, let's just talk about the Heat's or no, not the Heat, but Denver's ability to repeat. I think it's going to be tougher. I think it's going to be tough, and it's always tough to repeat. That's why we see so few of them outside of, the real dogs, the real super teams here. And Denver is far from a super team. However, they are a really well-built basketball team, but, things are going to get tight here financially for them. They're going to be fine with they're going to have Jokic, Murray, and Porter under contract for next year. And, Porter is making $30+ million, and that could get uncomfortable maybe 2 seasons from now. Once that second tax apron really starts to rear its ugly head in this new CBA. But for the most part, I think they're going to be able to retain the core that got them here this year. Bruce Brown gave some verbal assurance that it's not a guarantee that he's not back next year. And it's not, Bruce Brown is a really good player and really was super important to this title run. If they lost him, because he has a player option, he will undoubtedly, I think there's no way that he doesn't, pick that up, or that he doesn't, refuse to pick it up rather. But if they could, actually, I don't know. He may have to pick it up to come back, and maybe he does one more year with Denver and, bets on himself. But thing is, a guy like that is probably due for some pretty good long-term money. So it is more likely than not that he does move on. But with or without Bruce Brown, like, they're going to be fine. Like, let's just look at them. They draft really well. Like, obviously they got Nikola Jokic. That is the best draft pick of all time. Number 43, they drafted him during a Taco Bell Quesarito commercial, dude. Come on. They found Jamal Murray in the draft. They just found Christian Brown, and say what you will about Christian Brown. Dude's a damn good basketball player, and he played serious minutes for them in a closeout game in the NBA Finals. And they found him in just last year's draft as a rookie, playing serious minutes and playing really well at that. So you expect certain guys to just go up a level, like Christian Brown. Depending what you think about a kid like Peyton Watson. Of course, and they have this year's draft, and you can always get creative. You can always get off of a bad contract. You can always send out a pick, get a guy who's on an expiring deal. Once you have the real 6 or 7 guys that you really want to go for it with, getting the tertiary 7th, 8th, 9th guys to get you through a season, then you trim your rotation to get you into the postseason. It's always easier to do those things. So I also think that's part of a narrative that's going on with this new CBA, is like, oh my God, like these teams with, they go over the tax, like they're gonna be effed, they're gonna be screwed, they're gonna be totally like, it's gonna be so hard to win now. You'd almost rather be one of these teams that doesn't have all this money attached to guys. It's like, no, you would 100% rather be Boston having to pay Tatum and Brown than being like Houston and having really no direction. And sure, you have a shit ton of cap space. Congratulations. You also have no direct pathway forward to winning in the near future. Right. Like Boston, no matter what the stipulations are, will find guys who can get on the court, right? Milwaukee, if they have to pay Chris Middleton, and it's going to be really hard for them to keep Middleton and Lopez, but if they do, then they're going to find the other guys. Like they just will. Like if it's through the draft, it's through the draft. If it's through a weird trade, it's through a weird trade. If it's a buyout guy, buyout guys are one of the stipulations of the CBA. So maybe it's, like I said, it's not going to be a perfect world, but I just think we're kind of going too far in the other direction of like, wow, you don't want to be one of those teams who has all these expensive players. It's like, no, you pretty much want to be a team that has the burden almost like, but the lucky burden of having to pay high level talent. And so Denver's going to be in that situation. They've got expensive guys, but they've also got the best player in the world. And I don't think you could really draw up a better player to play alongside Nikola Jokic than Jamal Murray. Like the fact that they've been at this for 7 years together now, they play off of each other so well. That is one of the most devastating two-man games, one of the most devastating pick and rolls in the sport. It's devastating. It is remarkable. Like the efficiency that they score on the pick and roll, the efficiency when they're on the floor together. Like I said earlier, the fact that they can take Jokic off the floor and have the faith that Jamal can carry the load for those short periods of time. They're going to be fine. Like, as far as their ability to repeat going forward, it will be difficult. Phoenix, say what you will about firing Monty Williams, bringing in, I'm totally blanking. I'm so blanking. You know who they hired. I do too. I'm just blanking on this name. But the fact is, like, they're going to have a training camp together. They're probably going to bring Chris Paul back. They're probably going to trade maybe Ayton. There's going to be something interesting that happens with Phoenix. Maybe they do pull off this Damian Lillard trade. The same trade that I structured at the trade deadline for them. I did. I structured a trade for them, and I thought, like, if they wanted to go all in, like they just got Durant, they could really get crazy and go get Damian Lillard. There's going to be something weird that happens with Phoenix. There's going to be something weird that happens with LA, whether it's Kyrie, whether they get Damian Lillard, right? Like, these teams aren't done. The offseason just begun today. The draft is coming up on us very quickly. So things are going to get weird. Like, something weird's going to happen with Golden State. They just lost Bob Myers. Could there be somebody who steps in and wants to take it a different path? Not to say they would full-fledged rebuild, but like, do they say, you know what? We're not paying you, Draymond. Is there a sign and trade with Draymond? I've seen guys say that they'll trade him to Boston. Unlikely. Really unlikely. Think that one through for a second. Do they trade though? Do they finally offload all the rest of the young guys and some picks and try to get involved somewhere? It's something weird is going to happen with these other fringe contenders. Wembanyama's going to San Antonio. San Antonio's probably going to be the favorite. I'm just kidding. I think with a full offseason under, Phoenix's belt, with all the kind of uncertainty in the trade market, we know about Dame's potential to be traded, but there's, how this goes. There's always another guy who pops up. Is it Karl Towns? I think Karl Towns is likely to get moved. Could Trae Young get moved? Could Trae Young and Karl Towns get moved for one another? There's always going to be some mix up and shake up. Denver would be, as of today, be my favorites in the West to repeat. But it's going to be a long road to that, and it's a long off season ahead of us. As for Miami, I think Miami has some pretty interesting decisions to make. You have to, if I'm Miami, the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to think too highly of myself, right? Like I don't want to beat myself up and be like, you know, everybody's got to go, because obviously they just played themselves in the NBA Finals. Did some things break their way? Absolutely, but even if the Celtics had made the finals, things would have broken their way. You know, they would have caught some injury luck, or they would have been the beneficiary of like a guy going down in a series. Like say instead of Game 7, Tatum sprains his ankle. Say Butler sprained his ankle in that game, right? Then something pretty much always breaks a team's way for them to get a little luck. It's better to be lucky than it is to be good, right? But for Miami, I think you have to be honest with yourselves. The odds of this group, of this core, doing this again is really unlikely. Like extremely unlikely. Like so super duper unlikely. Like you need to make a change. Now, the good thing for Miami, you really should like a lot of the things you have. You should obviously love Eric Spoelstra. You have the best coach, one of, if not the best coach in the sport. You have Jimmy Butler, who, age 33, you're not at a point where you're going to worry right now. Maybe you're a year or two away from being like, okay, he's starting to creep into that. He's on, once he creeps past the wrong side of 35, that's probably when you start to worry about things like that. But Jimmy Butler, to his credit, has kept himself in phenomenal shape and just played, had a fairly impressive playoff run. Obviously we know how amazing the Milwaukee series was. After that, I'd say it was a good run, not a great run. He was averaging a lot closer to 20 points a game than he was 30 points a game. A lot of his stats were kind of inflated from the Milwaukee series, but it's that Milwaukee series that was is what propelled this run in the first place. So you like that you have Jimmy Butler, you like that you have Bam Adebayo. Do you wish Bam Adebayo was a bit more consistent? Yes, but also Bam Adebayo is 2017 draft, and he's not a superstar. So guys who aren't, superstars, it's going to take them more than 5 or 6 years to really get the ball rolling. And if you have any faith in the guy, you think, then he's going to be better next season. They did this without Tyler Hero. I think that's where some intrigue comes in. I personally really like Tyler Hero. I think he projects as somebody who could be their best player one day. I think, like, if you're thinking post Jimmy Butler era, you're thinking about Tyler Hero to help you, in that stage. But you could also say we're kind of in the twilight of whatever good years Jimmy has left. Do we kind of punt on Tyler Hero because we just did this without him? And do we package him in a few first-round picks? And do we try to go and get something a little bit better? Obviously, once again, Damian Lillard has been vocal about, Miami and how he would welcome a trade there. Do I think that makes them infinitely better? Do I think that makes them... I think it makes them more of a firm contender than they were this year, and this year they made the finals. So I think it's a trade that gets you that pushes them upwards. Is that the perfect player to put next to Jimmy Butler, who's pretty ball dominant guy at times, who isn't really an off the ball player? Maybe not. But Jimmy Butler can play off the ball. Is he most effective with the ball in his hands? Yes, just like the rest of the top 20 guys in this league. Yeah, he's more effective with the ball in his hands, of course. But I think if that trade's available, I think you have to really look at it and say, it might be worth doing. Like I said, Damian Lillard's not the only guy who's going to become available this offseason. So, they're going to have opportunities to to make changes to this roster, build around Butler, build around Bam. I don't think either of those guys have a shot in hell of getting traded. Heat culture wouldn't allow it. Heat culture wouldn't allow that to happen. But yeah, no, nobody's picking Miami next year, right? Like, there is no. I'll tell you one thing that won't happen. There is no Kevin Durant like trade that could happen. Like for Phoenix, like that one just kind of fell into the lap, and even that didn't really work out as well as you'd hoped. There's really not going to be anybody of that caliber who comes along in a trade. The absolute best player who could even remotely be available for trade this offseason, just off the top of my head, is probably Jaylen Brown. But you're not going to get Jaylen Brown easily. Like, he's not getting traded. I'm sorry. Like, if you think he's getting traded, like, the last possible time he was going to get traded was last summer for Kevin Durant. And it seems pretty official that the deal was, Shams just reported this again, just confirmed it last week, that it was Brown, White, and a pick. And honestly, it's like, if you're Celtics fans, and you're looking at how Game 7 went, and you're like, well, if instead of Jaylen Brown, if that was Kevin Durant, like, how does that break? How does that go? Yeah, it leads you to be curious, but also Kevin Durant got injured on 2 separate occasions post Suns acquisition. So, like, and they got bounced in the second round. So, and Boston had just swept Kevin Durant, who, in a playoff series against Brooklyn, where he didn't look spectacular, right? And you'd honestly think that Jason Tatum kind of outplayed him in that playoff series, that first round series against Brooklyn 2 years ago. So you weren't all like gung-ho on trading for Kevin Durant, and I certainly wasn't. I didn't think they should have. I still don't think they should have. Like I said, since then he's been injured twice. Since then he's actually been injured, I believe, on 3 separate occasions, but 2 even since getting traded to Phoenix. And then, they get bounced out in second round. Yeah. And Kevin Durant certainly wasn't like, I don't think he was lighting the world on fire this playoffs. Like, he was great. Like, he was good. Like, but by his standards, I mean, I don't think he was like, you weren't like, whoa, are you, like, you weren't at work the next day being like, did you see what Kevin Durant did last night? Like, oh my God. It was like, honestly, you're kind of more impressed with Devin Booker a lot of the times this postseason. But that's Miami. Nobody's picking them to win next year. They have a little bit of flexibility if they wanted to move Hero, but also maybe they just say maybe getting Hero back is like our acquisition. Like maybe getting him back is the key, like the piece. And I wouldn't argue that at all. Like, yeah, they kind of were awesome at times without him, but I don't think like I think in the long run, in the big picture, they are better with him. So that's Miami. That is Miami. That is Denver. That is your NBA Finals. Yeah, that was no cuts at all. And you probably could have argued about halfway through this episode, I probably should have done a cut. My mouth is a little dry and I've got water right here, but I'm not gonna. I was kind of in a flow of empty thought. I don't have a Google Chrome browser open. I don't have a browser tab open. I hardly have any notes. I just wanted to talk about the NBA Finals. This episode kind of got me back in my flow, back in my podcasting bag. Like I said, I'm way more excited for the NBA drafts coming up and free agency, and I'm excited for the first like emergency podcast that we do after a big trade or a big signing. We're honestly not going to have a very big, I shouldn't say emergency podcast for a signing because, July 1st is coming up, but what's the biggest free agent available? Chris Paul? Like if he does get waived and they split ways, is it going to be Chris Paul? Is it going to be Chris Middleton? Unless Chris Middleton signs with the freaking Celtics, Like, there's not going to be a reason to talk about that. Had newsflash, that's not going to happen because the Celtics can't sign anybody. They couldn't even sign me. They're so deep into the salary cap. They couldn't even sign me, dude. So actually, they could. They could just give me the NBA minimum, and I would gladly accept. I'd be taking quite a pay cut from the podcast revenue to go play for them, but nonetheless, Wick, Brad, go ahead, give me a call. I'm here. I'm working. Okay, the fact that I just rubbed my eyes for 30 seconds and now I look like a drug addict is enough to tell me that I am fucking tired and I need to go to sleep. If it got a little muddy in the middle of it because I was talking with a groggy voice and a little bit out of my train of thought, if I started looking off left and right, my apologies. This is the first one back. This is a little layup line podcast. I made some slight changes to the set, and by the set I mean my room. Nothing drastic. I just changed out the vinyl that you see. That is Prince 1999, best year ever. Okay, and that is John Mayer, Born and Raised. I have a whole vinyl collection down there, and I haven't changed out the records you see since I started doing the podcast. I used to do it all the time, but I always liked having the Kanye 808s record right there. Also, I put out some cards, some graded, some not. Most notably, if you're watching the video feed, I do apologize, is Jason Tatum rookie card graded PSA 9, not PSA 10. I can't afford that. Okay. But once I sign with the Celtics, like I said, we'll be all set. Also, there's some more Celtics paraphernalia over on this wall, but you can't see that because it is off limits. Yeah. So that was today's show. It's now 12:30 at night. And I gotta go to bed. So we're gonna try to get this uploaded super fast, and then I'm gonna go to bed. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, but not only tonight, but for this whole second half of the NBA season. I started doing the podcast around January or February, just out of spur of the moment. I really wanted to talk basketball, but I really only wanted to talk about it my way. And of course, the only way to do it my way was not to talk to my friends, but to talk to you all. And for those of you that have actually stumbled upon this feed, I'm surprised there's actually more than 3 of you. So thank you for checking it out. Thank you for ever liking a video on YouTube. The YouTube feed, it's still not even close to where we want it to be. The YouTube feed is lagging behind. But if you've ever liked a podcast, saved it, downloaded it, shared it, I really, really am so thankful because I wasn't sure if this was going to get any traction at all. And it's gotten, very, 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 very mild, very moderate, playback. And what little feedback I have heard directly from you guys has been really inspiring, really positive, and I'm really grateful. So I'm really going to try to hold myself accountable to making some more quality stuff, getting the YouTube feeds updated, pushing myself to make dreaded TikToks, because I fear that is the most likely way that I'm going to grow this thing. But if you've got any ideas, any comments, any feedback, you know how to find me. Thank you for listening. We're going to get into some really fun stuff in this off season. Congratulations, Denver. Any Nuggets fans listening, congratulations to you. I was really excited for you last night. Oh, I forgot. I got to make this Denver Nuggets thing about me because I have a podcast. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kind of taking a shot at people who like every talking head and every guy with a podcast, like, and even everybody with a Twitter account's like has to like make this about me. And I kind of made it about me with a tweet last night in a small way, but really, I really do love this Nuggets team. I have a Nikola Jokic t-shirt. I have a Nikola Jokic like plush doll. I have a pair of socks. Um, but really, uh, I've tried to catch Denver pretty much every single time they've come to play the Spurs, each of like the last 5 years. Like, and that includes preseason games. I remember one year I couldn't get anybody to go with me. Um, so I was just going to go by myself, but I was like, um, I'm trying to think about Gary Harris had just inked, I think, a 4-year, $80 million deal. So I don't remember. I'm guessing 2017. I think 2017. Yeah, it had to be. It had to be 2017. But I remember taking my mom to that, um, just because she had taken me to games when I was younger, which helped spark my interest in basketball. And at the time, preseason tickets were pretty much all I could probably afford. Um, and so, but I had to see Jokic. I had to see him in person. I've been watching him since he got drafted, and I had to go see him in person. And this was well before the MVP stuff with him, let alone the player that he is now, although he was great back then. And I just was fascinated by that group, Jamal Murray, Garrett Harris. I just kind of thought like that's one of the best like little young cores in the league. And ever since then, I've been hooked, and now I try to go see them every time. This year I did good. I got to see them twice. I actually saw the Spurs beat them, and I remember around that time people were kind of concerned with Denver, and they had kind of looked like they had taken a step back those last like 6 weeks of the season. And yeah, it's fun that I've kind of been there to watch them. We've all been, if you've all, whoever's been watching this run, watching them finally put it all together, get healthy, not give up on this group, not give up on Mike Malone. It is special to like kind of see it all come to fruition and kind of all see it all, meet in the form of a title. So yes, I was happy for them last night, and I was happy to just as a fan to watch them celebrate. I think that was a feeling a lot of people had, which was just like we're happy for you, we're excited for you. It's just a very likable group, very likable star players, very likable coach, and I think they're here to stay. So, congratulations again, Denver. I know that feeling is incredible. I was a little bit jealous, but it was fun to celebrate you with you just for a night. So that's going to do it for this episode. I will see you all in the next one. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.